business entity. The second one is enhancing adaptation and resilient vision of private sector value chains, including agribusiness. The third one is to build capacity and enhance business climate adaptation for the private sector. The fourth one is to foster public-private partnerships in climate change, especially finance. So what support does the private sector envisage to inspire to adequately innovate and solve climate change impacts that affect food and agriculture now and in the future? So KEPSA actually established a climate business innovation network to help private sector actors integrate climate change in their business operations and strategies, build capacities and increase awareness of the nexus between climate science and business. The CBIMK coordination mechanism links the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry and the National Climate Change Committee. Secondly, we have technology and innovation in agriculture research for development of more drought-resistant seed crops. By circular economy, infrastructure and technologies, development of adaptive technologies in all development sectors and dissemination of adaptive products and services are priority focus areas for resilience and climate change. KEPSA is also setting up a business climate that will support businesses in areas of innovation, capacity building, reporting, and amplifying the contribution of business to climate solutions. We also support is also needed around technology and innovation in green value chains, including by circular economy, business climate, finance, operationalizing institutional agreements with private business information networks, organizing the private sector sessions during the forthcoming African climate week, and plugging into the regional and global forums on climate negotiations. Ladies and gentlemen, let me highlight our potential through African consumers and businesses who will reach 6.6 trillion by 2030, up from 4 trillion in 2015, according to the McKinsey study. This trend is spurring growing markets in various sectors where the continent has unmet needs, such as agriculture, agribusiness, transport and logistics, among others. Climate proofing, food, logistics, and agribusiness value chain offers an opportunity for the private sector to be part of food and agribusiness value chains, while at the same time establishing continental resilience and adaptive value chains that support development. In these remarks, I'm pleased for our partnership today and look forward to the presentation.
Thank you very much, our Chair. A good reflection on the role of private sector as climate change implements. For a long time, I always say, people who should bring mind, not solutions. We are saying that private sector is a solution also. We are the innovators of solutions, so action within climate change is not possible without the private sector. Also, let us understand that there are opportunities in climate change. It's not just a corporate social responsibility. It's not that which we do after we have done all the good things. It is opportunity to invest. It is opportunity to do business, and not just for Kenya, but also the global value chains offers an opportunity, especially for Africa, to the African continental free trade. We want to protect ourselves as private sector, as well as harness climate change as a business opportunity. Give a round of applause for the chair once again. We welcome our keynote speaker, representing Honorable Philip Keno Asama, the Principal Secretary, State Department of Port Development to the Ministry of Agriculture and Land Development, represented by Engineer Richard Anui. Welcome.
Good evening. I'll be protocol and as you said, I'm here. Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, related to the climate change. Here's what and it is my pleasure honor renew for you to everybody in Kenya's private sector role, which of providing food and agriculture industry climate change. Agriculture is key, meeting challenges of feeding and growing population, creating wealth, reducing poverty, managing degradation and our natural resources. In Kenya, the sector carries about data, 30% of 30% of gross GDP and accounts for 27% of the activity. Through linkages with other sectors, with about 40%, and actually about 7% of our. So agriculture is very key to our economy. Being predominantly rainfall, the sector was vulnerable to impacts of climate change, particularly changes in temperature regime, precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events that include droughts, floods, and other disasters that were key. We have that are increasing frequency and intensity leading to destruction, infrastructure, loss of investment and income. Currently, in Kenya, about 7.9 million people. Our population are immature, usually expected by drought or development. That pests and diseases that are found and conserve and losses. Now the value addition is of product. We have our country realize 100% food security. Food and nutrition security. Both steps are needed. So, say Kenyan for hunger, death of hunger, and independent of rainfall and agriculture. The private sector is key in developing solutions to alleviate the risks that take up the opportunities through provision of required skills, advisory services, financial resources, technologies, innovations, products, and product EGCs and many other EGCs accidents that are experienced crops, equipment application of climate change information, and early warning systems, market and research, among other things. Now, the ministry supports the private sector. In its contribution to provide a conducive policy environment and support the private sector in the future, improving the food and agriculture industry, climate change. The ministry, the Department of Food Crop Development, promotes public-private partnerships through various initiatives. The ministry has developed a climate smart monitoring system, evaluation framework to facilitate monitoring, reporting, and evaluation of climate action by host stakeholders. The organization of the climate change unit coordinates the streaming of climate change action plan established by the Climate Change Act of 2016 that are reviewed the development of the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Strategy that came in 2016, and the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Implementation Framework that covered in the same period. In partnership with stakeholders developed. We also developed develop the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Monitoring Evaluation Framework, facilitate monitoring and reporting and evaluation of climate and food security action by all sectors. Now, to promote an inclusive institutional framework, coordination, harmonization, and collaboration between public and private sector, the ministry facilitated the establishment of Kenya Climate Smart Multi-Sector for stakeholder platform, both at national account levels, partnership with the MDAs and the private segment, CSOs and development partners. Also involve research and activities. The aim of this is to be able to capture what is happening on the ground. Under the same, climate smart agriculture was stakeholder platform. A website has been developed and embedded in the ministry. The website with the name of knowledge sharing of CSL, reporting on CSL actions from various stakeholders in the countries, in the country, influencing policy development, enhancing social inclusivity in CSL, and also fostering collaboration networking among stakeholders. The department recognizes value-added agriculture as one of the solutions to facing farmers. In this regard, there's the establishment of agri-human centers, which provide all the agricultural activities. Farmers are along the value chain in our country. The agri-human hubs links farmers, private sector and public sector, and provide platforms for disseminating appropriate technologies, climate smart technologies to farmers, entrepreneurs, agro-based small and medium-sized enterprises, adoption of our modern agricultural innovations. Now, we observed that it has been said and noted that there is a significant change in temperature. It has been observed that there is significant rise in temperature in some of our areas and scenario areas. Now, these few conditions are being observed. We observed long years, over 4 years, and it's continuing to increase itself. So agriculture is basically the most the culprit for this climate change. Now, increased aridity and flows have been observed also. These have brought down the issue of the normal value chain, the normal livelihood. So we feel that increasing vulnerability is expected as a result of across the country, social, economic, environmental system, and with the high likelihood of reverse much of the positive development and progress that the country has achieved. Bearing the challenges that we have, putting on in mind that what's happening, we feel that the private sector is very key. Private sector is very key in training. Very key in driving the achievement of our farmers. Data and evidence, we get it by data evidence. Then we feel that the future of this country basically investing in technology, investing in research, and doing what is expected of us. Private sector plays a key role in this. And as a ministry, we are working together with people from the against the dwarf system, the dwarf system. Counties take a lot of responsibility because the counties, those people to provide an environment, all the levels of government, provide an environment that for private sector very well. And therefore, there are many initiatives that we are doing, basically focusing on climate smart technology that will support our small scale farmers, focus on complete value chain. I mean, we collaborate with move forward and engage with the national policy so that they are suitable. So I wish to therefore call upon all of us to effectively participate, interact, engage, and share in this meeting the actions aimed at achieving the agricultural transformation, building climate resilience of our agricultural systems, and achieving 100% food security. And those are the basically, let me say that when I see this, that the issue is hot, it's real. Climate, really the rural areas. A lot of things on people. Also, we need to think out of the box. We need to think of the box. The reason of the home many stakeholder economy. We have realized that a lot of things that is climate change, but actual situation. So I'll learn the challenge. Let's see if we can support our farmers. That's system as they move forward. And I think so with that.
Thank you very much, Engineer, for amplifying the role of agriculture in the Kenyan economy. And at least I've learned something new. It's agri-business sector. And I think that is very innovative. Just to help us think outside the box. Also for highlighting the private sector in the country. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting is here. You are so the open remarks. Go to the real subject matter. And we see the real guests that we have as they share the highlights with us. So we're going to the second session. This session we have a moderated session. We will delve further into the Kenya's private sector role in future-proofing the food and agriculture industry for climate change in Kenya. And I will have a very eminent panel, just in Kenya but globally. So I'd like to welcome up front Mr. Pascal Lamy. And as he comes, he is the president of the Paris Peace Forum, the former Director General of the World Trade Organization, and the chair of the Climate Overshoot Commission. Welcome. The second panelist is His Excellency Aranpa González. He is, or he, she. Thank you for your understanding. So she is the former Foreign Minister of Spain and the Dean Paris School of International Affairs of Sciences. Welcome, Your Excellency. Our panelist is Ms. Tula Leneye. Ms. Tula Leneye is the managing partner, Activity Africa. I'd like to welcome our hosts, Vanessa Adams. Vanessa Adams is the Vice President for Strategic Partnerships of AGRA. The Chief of Partnerships for Inclusive Agriculture Transformation in Africa. Hope I see a lot of computer. Okay. I have to welcome Dr. Bimal Kantari. Dr. Bimal Kantari has done great work for agriculture in this country. He is the chair of the agriculture sector aspects. Food security and climate change and Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Is the panel complete? I hope so. Okay. So we will do a round we'll do a round of response. A round of exposing the subject matter we are dealing with. And just to give it a background, allow me to say as follows: climate change is a significant threat to the agriculture sector that's well articulated by engineer country, and it is also the backbone of Kenya's economy. And its impact is already being felt through reduced crop yields, loss of livestock, increased food insecurity. We are going to delve into private sector-led initiatives that can support small-scale farmers in enhancing resilience and climate shocks, and how the relationship with AGRA and the Climate Overshoot Commission can be leveraged to promote sustainable food systems. But just to help us begin, Mr. Pascal, please share with us the motivation behind the creation of the Climate Overshoot Commission. And is it necessary that we are even discussing climate overshoot?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us to this conversation. I'll try to answer your question as quickly as possible. The climate overshoot question. And we have a number of members of this commission here because we just spent 3 days working together on the recommendations. This commission will table by the end of August or beginning of September. We have Calderon speaking later. We have González. We have Vanessa Stands for our boss, MS Kenyatta, who's a winner here in Kenya, although he's command. And so it's a group of personalities with experience in governance, in business, with expertise in climate issues, with the Paris Peace Forum has created. Now, why did the Paris Peace Forum install this commission to look at the risks, the consequences, and the way to address possible overshoot of fire, the temperature, maximum temperature threshold, which Paris Agreement, the countries agreed that they would strive together to avoid global warming, which is happening, to response this 1.5 threshold. That's the starting point. The Paris Peace Forum for peace is about ensuring that this world will lead in peace in the future. And the origin of the concern is that we see climate change as a big threat to peace in the future. It's not just something that could harm us, something that will harm us in conditions that it might harm us. This is our serious issue. This area of climate change. And we start from the consideration that the risks of overshooting this one are growing. As it was in 2015, there were a number of actions that were described in order to limit global warming. Five, where we are now in 2023, to realize that the risks of overshooting some are not higher than what they were. And this leads to one consideration, which is that we have to look seriously at what the consequences will be and at how we need to readjust, rescale, reform, re-energize a series of measures which have been in the global international conversation of how we can limit change. Two of them have to do with less carbon, mitigation, emissions, and removal carbon in the atmosphere. This should lead to less carbon, less greenhouse effect, less increase in temperatures, and also looking at other ways which have appeared as possible response. So that's the first one. Is now currently practiced, although not at the wide scale, adaptation. We don't stop the cause of the damage, but we adapt to the damage. And the other one, which is much more controversial, which on which science has been working and making some progress in recent times, which is geoengineering, and which are various methods, including solarization, and the purpose of which is to artificially reduce the temperature. So that's roughly the universe that we are considering with one specific aim, which is that our recommendation to show how serious this problem is, and it is much more serious than what we see in collective actions, whether at national level.
Thank you, Mr. President. So allow me to bring in the second person, because I can see you're going into the conversations around the Climate Overshoot Commission. But thank you so much for painting the picture in our heads that the threat is bigger, and that we all want to look at the threat beyond just the normal business as usual. So, Your Excellency, Aranda, we'll be picking up from the President. What are some of the conversations that are going on in the Commission regarding the economies that are most vulnerable to climate change impacts, that is the developing countries, in a minute or so?
So very briefly, first, thank you very much for this invitation to be with you today. This is not the first time I meet KEPSA. I have a previous life that was at the International Trade Center, IPC, that many of you know because we've been doing a lot of work with you in adaptation, in the agricultural sector, in improving agricultural practices, and so on. So let's say that I feel very comfortable talking to you about what we are doing and how we are viewing the developing country angle to this conversation. First, to tell you that out of 14 commissioners, we are 14, 9 come from developing countries. We've got the president of a small island, Kiribati. We've got Indonesia, we've got Mexico, we've got Brazil, we've got Rwanda, we've got the former president of Niger. So let's say that we're Chinese, we're Brazilian. So let's say that we've got a good breadth of different perspectives. And in particular, the perspective of those who have not contributed to emitting reductions, to emitting emissions, to emitting CO2, but who are on the short end of the impact that those emissions are having on many of them. We are taking a particular interest on the agricultural sector. No surprise, because of all the population that are heavily impacted by, and that where there is a relationship very strong between development and climate change, which is an important nexus, is in the agricultural sector. So discussing how the international community can pay more attention to scaling up support for the agricultural sector to adapt faster to climate change, discussing what good practices are coming from the ground. A lot of good practices exist that simply need to be scaled. How to get to the last mile of farmers that very often don't simply have access either to the knowledge or to the resources. These are some of the conversations we are having with these very 3 big priorities that Pascal has mentioned. We need to accelerate the pace of emission reductions. let's say, on whose shoulders this rests? China, the US, India, the European Union. That's the order. They need to move faster in cutting emissions. Second, we need to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, the stock that exists. Even if we stop emitting today, we've still got a stock up there that we need to get rid of. That will take centuries, but we better start now. And number three, we've got to help people adapt, whether they live in rural areas or in urban cities, whether they live, they work in industry or in agriculture. That's a bit the moderator. This is a bit the task ahead for us.
Thank you so much for highlighting the role of developing countries. I wonder if there's a commissioner from Kenya, if there's a black Kenyan one. That is potential.
So we've got one that lives in Kenya. I think is a pretty good compromise. You get two for the price of one. And then on top of everything, she knows a lot about agriculture. So you get three for the price of one.
So you got a discount for a commission. So let's go to Madam Kule. Yeah, actually, now, back to Kenya now. You've worked in the Kenyan government. Engineer has told us many things about the agriculture sector, but I'd like you to share some different perspectives. Do you believe that we are doing enough to address climate change issue in the agriculture sector? What should we do differently?
Thank you. Thanks for that question. Just for clarity, I used to work in the Ministry of Agriculture, actually, quite closely with Engineer Henry, as the Agriculture Transformation Office Coordinator, as well as quite closely with Mark. And so just to answer your question and to provide some context, in the broader sense, no. We have two ministries that are focused on what climate change is doing to their sectors. That's obviously agriculture and the Ministry of Environment. And that has been traditionally set across because our governments are structured in a way that you stick within your mandate. But increasingly, we're finding that more interministerial coordination is required. So stronger partnerships like the ones with partners sitting in this room, I think are required to start the conversation that, for example, with industry and trade, how much are you impacted? I mean, KEPSA is here. Private sector has a big role to play, as both engineer on behalf of peers and Madam Caroline have highlighted, is that private sector is where the rubber meets the road. But it is within government's remit to provide the enabling environment to then have, to motivate private sector, which is support investments in climate change activities, climate action. And I know Madame has just mentioned even the issue of carbon removal. I know that Kenya, for example, has the largest basalt, or the second largest basalt formation. That would be great for carbon sequestration. And so how is our government creating that environment to allow for that investment to come in and create a new economy?
Thank you very much. I think the issue of interministerial coordination very, very important so that we cannot fully in different directions. So I come to Dr. Bimao, and you formed a very good, you lead a very great organization, ASNET. I'd like you to share with us some of the actions that ASNET is taking in responding to the challenges of food security, and especially the rural area.
Thank you very much indeed. If somebody had told me a year ago I'd be sitting in the same platform as Pascal Lamy and now. Mr. Lamy, what you've done with WTO over the years, you know, we, as Africa, we have much to thank you for the efforts you've done. So well done, Mr. Lamy, and thank you very much for being in Kenya. So as a private sector, I'm the only private sector representative on this stage, which confuses me. It's half and half. I should have had Flora here holding my hand, but it's quite surprising you talk about private sector, I'm the only one here. But you know, we in private sector, we have a little bit of concerns. We've met and has met several times, the Americans and British, and talking about trade agreements, and our biggest worry is that this is not our headache, but you're asking us to have the panel. you've named the 4 big polluting countries, China, whatever, Europe. They seem to have developed their economies over time, completely the whole world. And now you're asking Africa and Kenya, cut back on your factories, cut back on pollution, slow down development. And I think that's really unfair. Anyway, we are where we are, and we know global politics are as it is. So the problem in Kenya, we are right at the brunt of climate change. You've seen what's happening in Kenya the last 3 or 4 years. We've had serious drought. 40, 50 years ago, we used to have a rainy season, long rain, short rain. They used to be on time. Farmers used to virtually predict by the week when we're going to have things. Now, we see the last 3 years, it's been a disaster. This is the first year after many years that we've had decent rain. Problems with those things are not our problems alone, they're world problems. Europe, 20, 30 years have closed the doors to immigration. Now you're seeing the brunt of it. We have ships and boats coming across from where North Africa are trying to come into Europe because there's a serious crisis in this country. And if it's not taken more seriously, we're going to have hundreds of more boats coming across. Now we have Sudan, so you're going to have hundreds of Sudanese coming across. Because of climate change, it's one of the main reasons for this thing. And I think we all need to take seriously this problem. As you know, our president announced yesterday we're going to have an Africa conference just before COP. Because we are very concerned as a continent that we've been forced to horrible kill. Private sector is adapting, unfortunately not as quick as we should because we're struggling as it is in the private sector. Climate's not on our side. We don't have the technology. We don't have the funding. So we are looking, particularly when I look at Mr. Lamy, this is one of the main things I want to focus on is markets for a private sector. You need to open up markets in Africa. You need to open up markets in Europe. We keep complaining about the EPA agreement. It's not been signed yet. The Americans want to put a free trade agreement on us, which is going to just kill our agriculture. It's so one-sided. So when you sit where you are with the WTO or wherever you are, I think you really need to give Africa a break and say this is a special case. I mean, no way equal in terms of trade. The second thing, you need to put some money on the table. Our president's been shouting for a while. You've been promising us money to come in and help us with some of these problems we're having. Unfortunately, we don't see any money. Grow markets, protect the existing markets, allows us to sort of expand our markets. Subsidies, Kenya has been subsidizing our food production. I don't know how long you've been in Nairobi, but we are struggling with food cost of it, so we have to subsidize it. As it is, we're struggling with a budget deficit. We are in trouble. And finally, I think where Africa is going with this Africa Free Trade Agreement, and we see quite often is, I think Kenya can no longer be able to grow our own food and become food sufficient, but that's not the problem, or that's not an issue. Kenya is developing in the right direction with agro-processing, and I know AGRA has been helping us quite a lot with that. We want to be the center of agro-food production in Kenya. So we can import food from wherever we want. We can't compete with the Ukrainians, the cost advantage is doing. We can import from around the world, but as long as we process it and make food here, and then re-export throughout Africa is, I think, where the key competitive advantage is. And that's where we need to come from. Thanks, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bimal, for really highlighting the challenges of the global south, putting in context the Kenyan challenges, even as we begin this conversation or as we join the climate change conversation. I'd like to bring in once again Mr. Lamy, based on your experience from the World Trade Organization, the private sector in Kenya, we've had that we have a role, but do you believe that the private sector's role is key in building and determining the recommendations of the report that you are preparing? What would be some of the recommendations that you are preparing?
I think it's absolutely crucial to outline more from the year. Beginning of September, some of them will be old because of the situation that we see. This let me address one issue, which something of sleeping, which by experience I see as a major issue for business to adapt to climate change. This is the issue of standards. We have had outline sanitary user standardization, sure, products, important by the number of precautionary. It's known that it's stable. Business is used to that. They know how to go, and there has been in a number of efforts, and I take the example of this region, which I had a bit because one of my deputies when I was under maybe, so I know a bit about the CA. This region has been better than other African regions at harmonizing, mutually recognizing parts of the standards, which has allowed open trade and to benefit from economies of scale, which otherwise are not there if products cannot cross the border. That's the story so far. I see climate becoming a bigger and bigger issue that we now have on top of the previous generation standard, new standards about the environmental quality of the products. For the moment, this is a bit all over the place. Within business, some distributors, big retail chains, invent their own standards. They have done that for flowers in the past. On the pesticide residue quantities of flour, they now do it and say, my flowers are greener than the one next to it. And when the producer is confronted with that, he has no choice but adjusting the standard. So they're saying that this is an area where business has to look for stable, public, transparent standard, and for the globalization as much as possible of the standards. Nationally, of course, but still regionally, and again, for example, that has embarked on this, including the East African region, but also globally. At the end of the day, the real optimal solution is to have global standards. And this means a push by business, because business is the one that can say, hey, if this is fractured, if this is fragmented, I'm not doing my job and extending efficiency, productivity with the economic scale. So that's my short, pointed answer to your question.
Certainly a big call that it's time to think about global standards. It's time for business to adapt. I'd like to bring USASA around. How can businesses operate at global level, yet respond to climate change at the local level? And do you think Kenya as a country should be preparing the private sector for the 2% in this scenario?
So I think Kenya should prepare not for a 2.5 scenario. Kenya should prepare to make sure we don't overshoot 1.5 degrees. We are at 1.1 today, and we can already, you can already see it. You see this on your businesses. You see how sensitive some of our ecosystems are to the gradual increase in the temperature. So I think we've got to be much bolder now if we are to remain within the 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, how do you do that? How does business do that? It might be a business, big business, let's say, companies that have supply chains behind them. This is the case of the tea supply chain that has thousands of small farmers and pickers. This is the case of the avocado sector. I'm just mentioning a couple of those that I know in this country. The big has to be in a coalition with other big to make sure methods are developed that can be deployed to reduce emissions and to adapt. Let me give you an example, things that we did here in this country: energy efficiency of tea drying factories. making sure that you move to renewable energy, and you use biomass, for example, instead of using firewood. So the big has to develop the methods, and then it has to help the value chain align and adjust to the value chain. Now, it's true, and we just discussed it a minute ago, many of the standards that will help the big align to and the value chain align to those standards are moving targets, which is why it would be good to ensure these targets are not moving on the. Finally, I think there is an issue of finance and access to financial means in all of this, which is part of the conversation that will take place in January in Paris, in the meeting hosted by the President of France with the Prime Minister of India and the Prime Minister of Barbados. But it's a conversation that will continue at the beginning of September in the summit that the President of Kenya will convene of African leaders, one of the items being carbon markets, because it's also about monetizing the incredible natural resources that this continent has, that this country has, monetizing just to also be part of this financial revolution, green financial revolution.
Thank you very much. Allow me to bring in Vanessa now. Of course, Pascal has talked about innovations and the big helping small to grow. But what adaptation measures exist to maintain innovation and partnerships across both public and private sectors that will help to moderate potential damages, and also with a view of the food and agriculture industry, and how is AGRA supporting these measures?
Very simple question, right?
I like that.
Thank you so much. First of all, huge appreciation to all of you, to our commissioners for joining us and for being willing to tackle a very difficult conversation, which is really even beyond the scope initially set out by the Climate Overshoot Commission. And I want to appreciate the Secretariat of the Climate Overshoot Commission in the room, who've really been fantastic supporting all of us. I think to the questions and the points raised by Marilyn Sanchez, she's leaving for the airport. I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for your great contributions. We expect you back in September, right? Great. Please thank her again. Audience supporter of trade and climate adaptation. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. So she has a new nickname. Okay, so I think on the question you asked, AGRA, first of all, it has a footprint, as you know, where our home is in Kenya. We have no global offices besides Kenya. This is our global office. Let me be clear. And we have a great supporting team from AGRA here in the room, and many of you in the room are partnering with us in a number of ways. But I also want to appreciate a sneak visit from our board member, Frank Bracken, who's sitting here at the front table. And he's not here in his purview as board member. Otherwise, I would have to cede my place to him. But he came as a private sector engagement activity, which he's on a separate mission. But I would like to appreciate the board of AGRA and the leadership within AGRA, as you mentioned, Dr. Kalibata, but also His Excellency Ali Mariam, are huge advocates for climate adaptation and resilience of the continents in Africa and in the food systems conversations, which Agnes had the honor of leading globally, which really was about the 35% emissions coming from food and agriculture contributing to greenhouse gases. And so many of the conversations which have to do with climate change mitigation strategies, and you asked about technology solutions, focus first and foremost at the big problem of fossil fuel emissions and the larger emitting countries. And this is really the coming out in the report and all the analytics and not to be ignored. But there are investments and in Africa, which are fossil fuel investments. And we want to see more accessibility to lower cost energy and inputs in Africa, right? Fertilizers and fuels. So in the conversations we've been having, it's about equitable access to the necessary inputs, right? To continue to develop and not hamper development, as you were concerned about. Because it's well recognized, I think, in all of the agreements and the documentation that, and we talked about this extensively, none of the recommendations should hamper the necessary food security and within the country. It shouldn't be a hindrance for the needs of today to solve for the problems of tomorrow. And yet, President Calderon will speak about this, if we don't solve the problems that are coming and that we know are coming, which is climate overshoot, we also won't be able to pay for the adaptation requirements that we're going to encounter. And so I was very pleased to hear of the great progress in Kenya on climate adaptation and mitigation frameworks and measurement, because this is, for me, the biggest issue of equivalency, which is being able to have really transparent, clear measurements. And you talked about standards. I think in the private sector, it's true in the public sector as well, which is let's have tools and technologies available at our fingertips so that proper decision analytics can be made. And that's in planning for future disasters. It's about mitigating droughts. It's about having the right drought tolerant seeds. It's about low emission rice, for example, which also can be high yielding. So it's about rotation crops. Dr. Tilaho Namede, if you want to look him up online, has published over 100 papers on soil carbon efficiency and utilization of proper inputs so that farmers can actually make decisions on their own farms, which take into consideration all of the latest technologies which we know are available through satellite and other analytics. So this is our hope as AGRA across all of the 15 countries which we're engaged in across Africa, which is both it's the year of support to the African Continental Free Trade Area, which the AU pronounced in the beginning of the year. All of us know that if the markets can't grow, we don't have a market to deliver to, then farmers wouldn't have what to produce for. And this is number one and first and foremost. Sapti Odito is here. She leads on our gender and inclusivity. We know that the most vulnerable populations tend to be youth and women, and they get hit first and foremost. And so what are we doing and planning for in the vulnerable communities, and while we also adapt and mitigate the changes which are occurring?
Thank you very much, Vanessa. I'm pleased to know that Kenya is ahead of us so far. And the work that you're doing within to support, especially the farmers. Allow me to just have two more last rounds for all of us, and I will take Tule now. We've heard about the significance of the subject of climate change, the significance of remaining within the 1.5 degree centigrade and the role of private sector. What do you think should be the incentive for private sector to take climate change seriously? Do you really think that we are that serious? What can motivate us to take it more serious?
A tough question. I think, to be honest, as long as your consumer is aware of what they're consuming or what they're buying, private sector will respond, right? I know I may mention the issue of standards. I think we will be pushed to make those changes. Even if we are climate change naysayers or non-believers or a little bit slower to adapt, as Bema was saying. Part of what we then now need to look at, like I was mentioning, is partnerships to support our private sector be able to adapt much quicker, because these technologies are a lot more expensive. You have to change your whole processes. If we're looking at decarbonizing timber products, how where do we start, right? And how do you support companies that that actually provide these products to the global economy? But I think we need to then have a more consumer education. It shouldn't just be about regulations. Even though I came from government for a little while, I've always felt similar to the mouth, but not as strongly, that policies need to be enabling rather than punitive. We need to create an enabling environment rather than a restricting environment, right? We are in a global economy after all. So climate change amendment bill, for example, as Carol has just highlighted, needs to also be a lot more private sector focused, whilst government has a role to play and public sector has a role to play. The only way we will then move the needle on decarbonizing, having climate change impact is with the private sector.
Thank you so much. I think you are very private sector savvy. When we say consequence of us to incentivize of the private sector, then indeed then the rest follows and value chain and logistics. Allow me to bring in Dr. Bimao from private sector. And climate change, we have said it's important, we've made the thresholds. Do you believe that private sector will replace the civil society?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes we feel they already are taken. I think why? Because civil society have a role in society, PMOs have roles, private sector. We all have roles in society, but sometimes our CSOs have an agenda which is funded by external sources. And I'll give an example. We have a big drive at the moment, Oscar, on reducing our agricultural chemicals, our food source. And the agenda is driven by a German CSO. They're funding it in Kenya. And they say eliminate 49 chemicals and stuff. If you eliminate those 49, agriculture in Kenya will collapse. It's as simple as that. And then they keep saying it's causing cancer. I mean, the whole agenda is so harsh. It will close on agriculture because they're saying, ban some of the most important chemicals, which is important in this part of the tropics. So we have a serious issue where there's a European or a Western agenda. It may work well there, but when they translate it into the African scenario, without editing it, you could have a serious issue. So in some cases, I think CSOs are good. In some cases, we have to understand what the agendas are, who's funding these organizations, and it worries us a lot because you can't just transplant an agenda from another country into Africa and then say it's going to work. So we are worried, to be honest, and we are as a private sector, although we have KEPSA, we have ASNET, really the funding of our organization isn't really, we can't go around employing consultants and fight back. So we have a bit of a worry here. But to be fair, in Kenya, especially in Kenya, our government has always been pro-business, and they always listen to organized organizations like KEPSA, ASNET, KAM. And if you, Pascal, I think you should really be an excellent case study on how government in Kenya works so well with private sector through these organizations I just mentioned. So they give us a fair hearing. They don't always listen to us. But at least we get on the table quite quickly. We have engineers there, we have PSs, we have CSs. We can pick up the phone and talk to them quite quickly. And they're relatively fair. They give us an audience and they give CSO audience. So I think we have to give ourselves a big pat on the back, especially our government anywhere. They do listen to us. They give us space to talk. I think that's pretty good in terms of the everything.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biman. Allow me to bring in Vanessa now. Balance between private sector and CSOs within the sector as you work. Is there a strategy that will balance us with our fears so that we are able to work together?
Allow me, moderator, to edit your question.
Okay.
I learned from some great politicians that you answer the question you want to be answered, not the question you were asked. Because I think it's not a dichotomy, it's not an either or. In fact, we really want a very, very large and open dialogue. Governments have a critical role to play But we also know that the governments across Africa are dealing with so many constraints, right? And so many different, as Tuli mentioned, structural, agro, ecological, environmental constraints, budget constraints, multiple priorities. They could listen to 100 different organizations coming every day with a different proposal. If you sit as I have in the ministry, I sat in the ministry in Mali personally for over almost 2 years. I listened to everybody who came in that door asking for something from the minister there. And I came to really appreciate the incredible stress on the governments trying to provide services to the populations that they have to serve. And so I don't think it's either or. No, I think it's really about aligning around critical constraints and strategic objectives and mobilizing resources in a way which actually make a difference together. And I think you mentioned not getting distracted by unfounded, undocumented accusations. I think it's about being very strategic. And I think Pascal Lamy is really, I think your life, your work has been around this, right? Strategically focusing on and cutting through where critical messages need to come forward. And this is something where my hope is also that governments and private sector can also use resources from development partners, use the civil society model of advocacy where it's necessary. Consumers make a huge difference. You know, there's some cases where global policies on lead were changed because of a consumer advocacy group of mothers in California. There were a few mothers in California who noticed an effect of lead on their children. And they started advocating and they built a global change in standards based on that one observed problem. And they built the evidence for it and documentation. So the consumers can also take a lead, can also drive change and can adopt change that also can have huge effects. And I don't think Kenya should be any different than that. We can be very strategic about ingredients which go into food. Ugali doesn't have to only be maize. It can be a mix of different grains which are more diverse, which are healthier. You know, we can experiment with ingredients with other. It doesn't have to just be that we talk about M-Pesa as the one huge success of Kenya, right? We can have other ones. Let's be innovative in drive the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you for redirecting my question and even answering it more. I mean, that's very informational. So the last question will be for this particular, then we'll go back to the audience. Is to the president, Mr. Pascal. I'd like to maybe just ask you, do you believe that the private sector voice within the climate change negotiations is adequate? And how can that voice be expanded even within the climate, within the Overshoot Commission?
Right. Not all the private sector is pushing in the right direction in climate conversation. We witnessed, still witness, by push back by industry in order to slow down the inevitable short, medium, long restructuration process they will have to go through. And this is a big problem because it happens that this part of the private sector is very rich. They have earned a lot of money. And we now know, and this has been true, that they have spent a lot of money in trying to explain, including recently, climate change, the sort of natural cycle, and that is nothing to do with human intervention, and with industrialization, and with consumption, and discovered emissions. So let me be frank on this one. The private sector is not one in climate negotiation. You have on the one side, I won't insist on that, spread out, a powerful, rich fossil fuel multi-companies. One direction. And then you have on the other side, the whole ESG time, which is companies who either under pressure of consumers, or of their own staff, or of their shareholders, of their management believe, as you said, that business has a role in society, and that society, the global problem is to the intervention. So they embark on their own improvement of greening trajectories that can go beyond what or taxation or pricing carbon. This is very much documented. And in between, we have people who are trying their best, as I just said, to cope with the concern of conflict. I think at the end of the day, we will not have governments, global institutions will not have a discussion with business, the people. They will have to interact with private sectors and what business overall has an interest in getting from government, public sector, global institutions is a clear, stable roadmap that everybody has to follow. I think our main role, and this way, our recommendations in the climate action plan, we are trying to frame them in a way that provides a clear sense of direction. This direction cannot be the one we have today. The one we have today is not enough. We have to scale it up, but we have to scale it up in a way that creates more energy, more finance, more initiative in the various ways we have to go to climate change. And I think this is our duty. This is why there are a number of old monkeys that have been in this commission. There are many of them, know that. But the reason why we can't I'm speaking the elder member of the commission, is that we have less time than you guys, some people actually spend more time. And we better use the time we have, mainly try to do something quickly, given the incredible pressure that we are under.
Thank you very much. Round of applause from panel. New information is gotten today, and the fact that challenge you're dealing with is global and just cannot ignore it. So it's your time now. Just take maybe a question, maybe a remark, and clearly direct question. If it's a question to the right panelist, or the panelists that would like to answer your question. Is this place very cold? They've been asked. Yes, I want you to say so. You've been the source of knowledge, so let's get a feedback how it went with OJ.
He knows that the reception following.
In the next 10 minutes, or 10 minutes. So here? Yes, I can see a hand there, can see a hand there. So how many hands are those ones? 5. Okay, there are only 5. You're sure 5? There is 1. I've seen 1 there. I've seen 2 there and 1 there. That's it. Okay, so let's start with who has the mic?
I have my.
What's the mic? Okay, please go ahead and be as succinct as possible.
Okay. I'll keep it short.
And introduce yourself.
My name is Bernardo Salva. I work in sustainable energy. But the conversation is very interesting. But when I look at Kenya, I see if we look at subsistence and small older farmers, they are more than 78%. So this conversation that we are having, and
this climate medics discussing, if we don't address, if we don't get whatever interventions we need to that life percentage of farmers, actually the domestic, I mean, the subsistence workers are the most impacted by climate change. And they need to be addressed in terms of adaptation. So in all these, probably private sector and AGRA and all that, if I get it right, are looking more at the commercial or the trading of small scale things. How about the subsistence guys who are actually most impacted by climate change? They might not be the biggest producers of emissions, but are the most impacted. What framework are we having to sort of sort it out?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Davis Mutini. I work for KEPSA. I've just been thinking, and we keep on talking about small-scale farmers in Africa and adaptation and resilience building. And I ask myself, will adaptation work if mitigation doesn't? So if we keep on saying that we build resilience for our farmers, but the climate keeps on getting worse because mitigation from where it's supposed to be happening is not happening. And I think it's futility because the climate change incidences we see will get worse, and we'll keep on building resilience, and something has to give. So I think there is need for a bigger conversation out there where mitigation, where emissions are coming from, as we talk about also Africa, what we need to do in our small way. But the other comment was, let me add just one. On the issue of private sector and where the conversation is. And I think the private sector in Africa needs to build the evidence of what it means for them to transition. I don't know if that is available because we keep on saying what does it take? Will we be competitive if we do the things that I think Dr. Vima said it very well on the issue of agrochemicals. It's the same case with climate change. If we transition totally, what does it mean for our competitiveness at the global market? And I don't think there is enough evidence coming from Africa on that whole issue. And I don't think we wait for some organization or someone from out there to come and build that evidence for us. I think the African and Kenyan private sector needs to build that evidence so that they can be compelling enough at the global discussion on climate change. Thank you.
So I needed just three. Davis gave us two. Yeah.
Sorry.
There's a reason why we have to take the first lots, the first set of questions, so that we can. Yeah, we finish the round after we got an official closing remarks. So the question of subsistence farmers, and then getting to understand this subject matter looks like Vanessa's question.
Let's talk. We should talk. So you're sitting at a table with several people right in front of you who can answer this in extreme detail. Let me start just simply by saying that AGRA is working 100% focused on smallholder farmers in Africa. And so everything that we're talking about, if it doesn't impact and benefit smallholder farmers at all levels, then AGRA should be out of it completely. So if we miss the mark, help us correct. But we work at the government level to help governments improve their strategies and data and analytics. We help the private sector to improve the way that they can source from smallholder farmers and provide services to smallholder farmers. And then, of course, the evidence and the body of knowledge so that farmers have the right information and tools to become more productive. So even if you have a quarter of a hectare, you can actually make a great livelihood. We have a case study. So land availability should not be the sole driver, right, of income levels. And so let's talk about that some more.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pascal. How do you balance adaptation and mitigation?
I think And when we see that, we should do something. There are a lot of trade-offs. And we have a trade-off between inflation and carbon capture. As the short go stop the 1, 2, 3. What's up there will remain there for a very long time, and climate change will not play. It will stay, it will not grow, that's what we do, but it will not develop. So we also need to start thinking seriously of how these technologies, nature-based technologies, class 1 or more industrial-based, how much they should do. Some would say we have to put all our money on mitigation. But if we do that, we don't address the problem for many generations to come, which we have to start factoring in the way we do. And the problem between mitigation and capture on one side and adaptation on the other side. Why should we put money on adaptation if the real problem is mitigation? Yes, simply we know that mitigation takes time, assuming we get where we get, which is zero net carbon in 2050. Now, so that this ambitious goal every day looks more ambitious because we are not there. So it's absolutely understandable that part of the countries on this planet are not the big emitters, are victim say adaptation needs more attention and so far. So I'm not doing anything. This is what I'm saying. A lot of these trade-offs have to happen at various levels. Some have to happen at global level. We will propose measures and jobs locally, which will be strong on India. Others have to happen at local. The part of what I just said is in the hands of the Kenyan government. The Minister of Finance can say that, the Agriculture can say that, the Minister of Industry can say that, the Minister of Energy can say that. Trade-offs have to be politically decided nationally and then individually. There's no other way. What now do most important at the level breakthrough peace in 10, 20, 50, 100 years is considered at its right scale so that hierarchy change in the way we run our economic and social systems.
Thank you very much, Andrew Pascal. I'm sorry, too late, Dr. Bilal. So, the need to build evidence as Africa and the plan for transition, is it something you can embark on? Well, yes. Oh, you can go.
Well, yes, and I think, well, you have to look in the context. That's basically what both Vanessa and Pascal have talked about. It's bringing everyone, right? It's government, it's CSOs, it's private sector, and our consumers. So in the short answer, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, there's a question. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll allow you to go and see. Please give the panelists a round of applause. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights with us. We are really grateful. Allow me to welcome His Excellency Felipe Calderon, who is the former president of the United Mexican States and Commission of the Climate Overshoot Commission, who will give us the closing remarks. Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Good evening, all of you. I want to apologize for being right later. But finally, it has been quite exciting and interesting. Apologize again because I will need to take a flight later on. And that is canceling the chances that I have for visiting and know really this beautiful country for my first time came. It's not going to be the last time, for sure. And also to, I'm going to give you that. Okay, give me a glass. Well, the point is I wanted to make closing remarks, so I was requested. Actually, the staff of the Overshoot Commission prepared very good last remarks. But I cannot escape from the temptation to address the issue we were discussing this afternoon. Say that a lot of things to first, the main issue, which is presenting and talking about the Overshoot Commission. What is that about? When in the flight that I need to take, definitely the crew and the stewards are going to announce, all this very famous announcement. In the remote case of a lack of pressure in the cabin, there will be some mask coming down from the roof, etc. You need to wear it, etc. So the Overshoot Commission is like that. In the remote case that we surpass, that we overshoot the 1.5 Celsius or 2 Celsius, these are the masks. Honestly, I want to be honest with you. What are the chances that we will surpass the 1.5 limit of very high, absolutely high. Actually, currently, we are like 1.2 Celsius already. In the land, not in the sea. But definitely by the end of this decade, we will be beyond the 1.5 and almost reaching the 2%. And what has happened with this less than 1 Celsius degrees that we have in the last century of global warming? The changes that we are contemplating. I'm talking about Mexico, my dear country, but I'm absolutely sure that you are suffering as well. Suddenly, tremendous floods invading the houses of everyone in the poorest communities of the country, especially besides the rivers. And suddenly, incredible droughts, worse than ever, canceling the effort of the people, the farmers, especially smallest farmers, the poorest again. And the poorest are suffering the consequences of climate change everywhere and every year are even worse consequences. Sometimes I believe we are trying to make it prouder to make a fake information between us to chat to cheat, but it's going to cheat. And that.
Oh, so, see.
No, but don't remind it.
Oh, cheat.
Cheat, yes. Sometimes we are trying to cheat each other. Saying that yes, we need to do more. We need to increase our ambition. Honestly, I believe that's going to be quite difficult, almost impossible. I cannot say impossible. It's almost impossible. It's all the record that you can do, but it's no problem. To reset. And what is going to happen? It's going to be worsening every single day. And we have more than a decade fighting for money to prevent this, and it's not there. So the commission is thinking in the remote task that we will pass, that actually we will pass, what is going to do? When I was invited to Pascal, maybe she regrets already to invite me, but that's another problem. I get into a completely new world for me. You can imagine it's like I'm talking about like a science fiction when we are doing the commission. 3 long days without any chance to be the beautiful Kenya outside. Inside a beautiful room, a beautiful hotel, but that is not exactly how in Kenya. Talking about the extreme cases you can imagine, how we have, for instance, measures related with emissions, of course, mitigating emissions. Very few because we are assuming that we will surpass that. So the question is going to take us to adaptation. But I thought that if I understood very well, but my English is not good, but if I understood your question was a good one. If we don't stop mitigation, if we don't mitigate, if we don't stop carbon emission, global warming, it's going to be impossible to fix everything with adaptation. Sometimes I believe that the problem of global warming, the carbon emission is like we are all together in a boat, in a ship, and the boat has a hole. And we, all the passengers, need to stop. We need to close the hole. However, and the hole is exactly the global warming problem, the carbon emission. And the consequences are exactly the climate changes. And adaptation is about taking the water out of the boat. And we are all, with our buckets, taking the water out of the boat. But if we don't close the hole, our boat is going to sink. And it's going to be completely useless and impossible to save the boat with more buckets and more effort and more adaptation if we don't solve the problem. We need to do adaptation, of course. I can't say. I said it's like a problem is what are we going to do is either addressing the causes of the problem or the consequences. Both, of course. But we need to keep in mind that we need to fix the causes. And it's going to be worse. And it's going to be worse, yes, for everyone, but for developed countries, rich countries, then you can be sure they will be very well adapted. Not the poorest countries like ours. So we are looking at adaptation, several ways, several mechanisms. We need to do it, yes. But in particular, natural-based resources. I love that because I have a country, beautiful, I can dare to say, as yours, Mexico. We have a lot of natural resources, jungle, woods, rainforests, and of course, beach and mountains and deserts, and it's a beautiful country. And I love to protect my woods, so my state when I was born, and the rainforest from the Mayas and everywhere. And I know that protecting them and reaching another way, economic incentives to protect them and to make them productive in a different way, we can fix part of the problem. But one of the big discoveries that I'm learning in the commission, that even though that is not going to be enough. So some people in the planet are thinking and actually creating another ways to remove the carbon in the atmosphere different from trees. And what could be done? For instance, is I hate the acronyms, carbon removal, artificial carbon removal, let's say that. You can, I have seen one, but this was a prototype model, but I can imagine it like a very big air conditioning equipment, And that equipment is going to take air from the atmosphere, and capture the carbon in the machine and then expel air cleaner to say. And that exists indeed. It's artificial carbon removal. Currently, it's very, very expensive. Some people that are actually afraid that if that technology increases, that will provoke that big emitters are going to continue to pollute. That's another discussion. But we are analyzing that. Another say, even though that is not going to be enough. So, like a science fiction, I insist. Somebody says, well, when one volcano erupted here, I have a beautiful active volcano in Mexico City, and you have a house there, which is your house, and really Mexican say it's active. The Popocatépetl. So when a big volcano make an eruption, there is a shadow, and that shadow will allow to reduce a bit the temperature of the planet. So somebody says, make a mimic of the volcanoes. And they are planning to send several planes to the atmosphere and spray some gases that can reflect the sunlight. And that's another technology. But honestly, it's still to be proved, a lot of research to be done. And why did we make a mistake at planetary level? What is something wrong with that? So we are exploring all those alternatives. But my conclusion today, my friends, we need to fix the hole in the boat. And we need to fix the hole in the boat, saying and remembering that 35% of the hole, as Vanessa said, is related to food production and natural forest or landscape related issues. And saying we need to close the hole doesn't apply, as the leader of the businessman saying, I looked at he is a very, very informed man. Doesn't apply to prevent or to reduce the chances for development of the poorest countries. I know that we live several decades with a dilemma that prevented a lot of people to take action on climate and bring us to that very late moment. The dilemma that say either we tackle climate change or we promote economic development. And of course, for politicians, businessmen, it's clear you need to choose one of them. I will choose economic development. I will choose creating jobs. But that, my friends, is a false dilemma. Yes, we can have economic growth and create jobs and poverty alleviation, and at the same time to tackle climate change. And it doesn't imply to stop the economic growth or development for anyone. Which it implies is to change the way and the pathway of economic growth and not make the same mistakes that we did, or several countries did in their own route for development. We arrived late, because there was an incredible traffic, stop traffic just outside here. It was like a 20, 25, almost 30 minutes we stayed there. Why? Because that is one example. That model of development was a big mistake. We cannot think anymore about cities focused on centralized in the car, thinking in the cars. And more cars, more avenues, and more taxpayers money for more largest avenues and elevated highways and peripheral rings, etc., etc. No. For poorest countries to start with the real development, we need to change the model. But that is expensive, it's inhuman, and very polluting, and unproductive, because the time you lost waiting for us is lots of production. We need to develop a new model. I remember when I was a child, long time ago, my mom waited like 2 years to have a telephone line, a direct telephone line at home. What is happening today? Today, everyone has a mobile phone. No lines anymore. And what I say is, for instance, in energy, we can leapfrog the obstacles and we can get the benefits of technology. And we, in the energy sector, we can do different things that we were made before. And I can continue and continue with example, but the idea is this: we need to have a new kind of economy we call the new climate economy in a commission I chair, in which we can decide a new kind of development. And the last reflection is exactly, or probably the sector I ignore the most, which is agricultural sector and landscape. But let me tell you one. The key issue for me is to increase productivity in the agriculture. And we can increase productivity doing the right things. You don't need to renounce to your own prosperity in the land. We can increase productivity, and that implies to be able to produce more in a less space. And it's able to produce more in a cleaner way. Not only good for the planet, it's going to increase the productivity for the farmer, and it's going to promote more access to the better markets to these European guys. These guys like Pascal, they pay very well. And if you do the things fine and clean, then you're going to be better payment for everyone. So I'm completely ignorant about these 49 petrochemical things or laws. I don't know what. It's my first time I hear that. But I can assure you, I believe that it's not going to be development without that. But what about some parts of the world? They have development without those products. What is happening in Europe itself? If we can find a way to do better things, and we need to share technology, share information, to provide access to the poorest people and family in the land to access to such technology and design a new model of development. And finally, we need to find a way to make real business for the poorest family in the land outside of the cities. So the rural families could have a small property or a small space for development. Maybe they cannot have the same competitiveness of the big, very rich people who have incredible big lands, a big space. But if we can, for instance, pay for environmental services that can provide by restoring the land, the degraded lands, restoring the forest, or financing a forestry, sustainable forestry that can provide food for the family, at the same time can sequestrate carbon from the atmosphere, that could work. I don't know, my friends, it's a passionate issue for me, but I conclude with this. We are thinking in the remote case, if we don't reach or we surpass 1.7 Celsius degrees, but please don't do that. Let's work together. Not only to avoid the highest risk for human beings, the highest risk for poorest families and poorest countries. Let's work together. Yes, to think of prepare those scenarios, but also to avoid a bigger catastrophe for the planet. And in that way, you can count on me and my fellow members of the Commission, Overshoot Commission. Thank you very much. And with this, I conclude my remarks.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I believe this evening, if you haven't wanted anything, is the passion and the commitment of the commissioners. I think it grabs you. Just feel that this thing is as real as it is. Allow me to invite you, Your Excellency, to come up front, together with Vanessa, the board for a move for. Yes, the council chair, I will come up front. Dr. Bimad, is this still in the room? You're here. Just do this for me very fast. I think the house team, you are well endowed with what should be happening around these cameras and photographs. Joseph Ronaldo kindly assists. I believe chance will be out of this place. There's a big AGRA team around here. Kindly just assist clear here so that we get the photo. Okay, a better photo. We have two questions. Yeah, we needed them delivered. There was one that with Gomeli and there was one just at the back. If those two can get the mics as this goes on, we will be good. We can just hear, then you'll share during the refreshments. I think it's good to hear what that question was, and please make it succinct and very clear. Gomeli, please go ahead.
My question is easy. And I think I want to ask about the role of pension funds in fighting climate change. We really need a lot of the support in mentorship, building capacity for pension funds to invest. That's a discussion we can have.
You got it. Next one, engineer, kindly join the photo. Please, kindly. Please, still remain. Yes, please, as you take the photo, please still remain at the photo. This engineer, we haven't taken the photo with you. And Pule, yes.
Sorry, I didn't see you. Who was asking for?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, good question. It takes for quite important good and bad news. Always, and I know very well the discussion and demands of the African country, the COP and all of it. It's about money.
Okay.
Through formal negotiation channels, COP, etc., I think it's exhausting. It's a game that never ending. And of course, it needed to continue that. However, the news is there are no billions that are discussed in the COP. Billions, dollars, euros in the world looking for viable projects in sustainability. So the world is including pension funds. I know several pension funds, like for instance, Toronto pension funds, Australian pension funds, and others, that they have a clear mandate from their associates, the retiree people belonging to those pension funds, saying, I want 5% of investment of pension funds in sustainability projects. And the managers of those pension funds are unable to allocate that money. So what is important is to break a bottleneck in this, which is we need to prepare people to design viable projects. So the good way to capture those projects, that money, which is an incredible amount of money, is to be able to present a viable project, saying, I have this plantation of teak or bamboo or other long-term forest products. These products, I'm going to talk about the teak plantation in Mexico in Japan. The revenues, the profits of the teak plantation is 25% a year. 25% a year. That's very good job. And pension fund, well, interest rates are incredible, but the pension fund will want to have a very high income. But if we can match that investment to create a new plantation that will provide very important revenues for the owner of the land, but also for the mutual fund or the pension fund, we are going to be a win-win situation. What is the problem? We need to create human capacity training to be able to present a model, business model for that, to say, we will plant these trees this year, we will crop them in 5 or 7 or 3 years even. We will sell in the market, we will get that. Our labor cost with this, and actually your plantation will be sustainable in this and that way. That is the bottleneck we need to break. So how to train trainers, how to capacity building or capacity builders. And that will be one of the most important tasks to break this bottleneck inside. But the money is there. They want to put the money in some of these business, but probably there are good business like this. So it's a good chip. Honestly, a lot of things can be done if we and all institutions associated with that are able to prepare the people, design it, including training and capacity in finances and business organization, whatever, very modest, even it's not sophisticated to manage, it's not about a master, whatever, but it's needed.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. The last question.
My name is Emmanuel Lejon. I'm from Bolosida Farm, and we specialize in irrigation and greenhouse. My question was, the farmers have two great barriers. One is access to capital, and the next one is access to manufacturers. Because when they want to go the green way or farming with the green system that they want, the cost of the equipment are extremely high. While also they are still startups, especially the young people, are startups that are regarded as high risk. However, how can that be enabled that farmers of that level can be able to access high risk finance from the PCs, as well as connection with the manufacturers to be able to have rates and system of them getting supplies and subsidies out of what they're going to make out of the funds. Thank you.
Well, I'm not very an expert in that, but what is clear is I believe that the project or the associated with the water and technology associated with water, and I suppose it's a startup. I believe that we need governments, we are not involved anymore, fortunately. Thank you. And private sector and NGOs needs to focus more how to connect ideas, how to help people to convert those ideas in real projects as what we were talking about, and how to connect those ideas and projects with people or places or families that demand exactly that kind of supply, for instance, water technology. Or if I understood well, maybe I made say whatever, the point is this. And to connect that with finances. And just, Vanessa was talking about the use of technology. She was talking about how to plan and how to crop and how to see in a different way with modern technology. The technology could be used for connect all those people isolated. It's like a those app, sorry for the example, like a those app dedicated to find a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Before the news apps, the apps are defined making amazing things, no? Because what? We are in a world lack of information before and technology allow us to connect. We need to develop platforms. Seriously, I have a better example. Sorry. With Mexico created, which is the a program associated with jobs. One of the problems of the productivity of the economy is there are a lot of people without finding a job, and a lot of companies with a position to be covered and take months sometimes. So we develop a platform to match people looking for jobs with companies looking for a worker. And that reduces this time of employment and increase. I believe we need to develop platforms, digital platforms, allowing to connect projects like yours with people that working in the land or in the farms. We need exactly that kind of projects with institutions, financial institutions, public, private, international, financial, or banking that can finance that kind of projects. But it's a question of information, use of technology, political willingness, and support of the right organizations. So a lot of this is, it sounds very easy. It is not, I know, but I think that will be the answer.
Thank you very much. Mexico has a very special place for Kenyans. I think we know the soap operas from Mexico. So thank you very much for responding to all the questions from the audience. At this point in time, I'd like you to stand, give your neighbor a high five, tell them thank you for coming. Thank you for coming, thank you for joining us, thank you for your time, thank you for sharing your stuff, thank you for sharing information. We are very grateful. I will send the refreshments and just right out there. Consider asking questions. Get a new friend today. Get a new card, get a new friend. Until next time, thank you. Bye-bye.